Hello everyone and welcome. Sorry for getting this week's video out late. We've had a few technical difficulties this week with trying to get everything together, along with keeping up with our other regularly scheduled programs. So if you can't tell, we have a change of scenery today. Today we are in our Christ the King Youth Ministry office. So I'm excited to have you here to get to see where I work, what I do. So this week, we're going to be trying to prove whether or not God exists. Can we prove that God exists? What is the correlation between faith and science? And can you have faith and believe in science? Can you be a scientist, a reasonable one, and believe in God? And does God exist at all? So I hope you are able to join us, sit back, relax, and have fun watching this video and discussing it with your parents. Can we prove the existence of God? Undeniably, can we say this is the point that proves that God is real? I think that's hard to say. I really think it's hard to put one pin down and say this is how we know God is real. Because if that was the case, I think we would have very few people who were saying that God wasn't real. But what's great is that God didn't just kind of make everything and then leave and then didn't provide us any evidence. You know, it's not like he just stamped everything and walked away. No, there's a lot of ways in which we can see the work of God in our creation, in our world. I'm going to invite you really quick to pray with us. And this prayer just thanks God for the gifts that he's given us in creation. These gifts are the mark of the Creator, the footprints of God here on this earth. So take a moment, let's pray, and come right back. Okay, welcome back. So in that prayer, you hear about us thanking God for all of creation. And I think it's kind of great that today on the feast day of St. Francis, we get to thank God for the creation. St. Francis, who was a champion for taking care of creation. And all this, when we look at creation, I think it kind of does point beyond just this physical world. You know, when it comes to the question of can we prove if God's real, I think a lot of people turn to science. Science has kind of become the benchmark for most people's faith in things. If you can prove something with science, done deal, that's a fact, no getting around it. But if we're going to prove something with science, we have to go with the method, the scientific method. So the scientific method requires that if we're going to make something a scientific fact, a scientific law, we have to be able to recreate whatever the situation was in a lab. I don't think we can recreate God in a lab. I don't think science has the capability to recreate God, who is a being that is not physical. He's metaphysical. He's beyond the physical in a lab setting. I don't think it's possible in any way, shape, or form. And that may be well, okay, then we can't say it's a scientific fact. But I would argue that because of science, we can make reasonable assumptions about God. Because of the scientific laws, which are ordered in such a way that we can say, wait, if we draw these conclusions together, we might be able to come to a reasonable assumption that God could be real and is real. So before we get into some of those proofs and some of those things, let's talk a little bit about faith and science. So first, faith. What is faith? Well, we have our Catholic faith. We have all these words of faith. Faith itself, the word faith, denotes the theological virtue given to us by God, by which we come to have the grace to believe in what he has revealed to us. And so through faith, we have grace to believe what he has revealed. And what God has revealed to us, first and foremost, is that he is who he is. He is real. He is being. God said to Moses, I am who I am. And then he also revealed his love to us. And you might be wondering, okay, well, that's what we say in the Creed on Sundays, right? But I would argue that science points to this as well. And this is where I have to make the argument that science and faith are not themselves contradictory. Science explains what happens and how it happens. It can explain pouring these two chemicals together, what's happening, and then the result, how it happens, the chemical reactions. Science can explain what happens when I put a piece of candy in my mouth and how it degrades through the whatever, I don't know, spit or other things in my mouth that help to break down the piece of candy. Science can explain how oxygen is taken into somebody's lungs and carbon dioxide respiration happens. Science can explain the way that paint dries. But science cannot explain why these things happen at all. Science is unable to explain why there is anything at all. And science cannot explain who set everything to be the way that it is. Because those things are beyond the realm of the physical world. Science is the study of the created world. It's the study of the observation of the created world. And so science is about the things that are in creation, the things that we can see and feel and touch. And then we have faith, which is about those things that, we believe in. We have the grace to know. And we can experience, but not in a physical sense. And, this may seem like, well, okay, so science versus faith. But actually, many scientists, since the scientific revolution, have been Catholics, have had faith. So the first one is Copernicus. Copernicus was a Catholic priest who came up with the heliocentric theory, which is just a long, big word for he came up with the theory that the sun is at the center of the universe, not the earth. And he came to that by studying the stars, by trying to figure out what happened that made it such this way. Through his faith, he came to this. And then we have Gregor Mendel, a religious brother, who is known as the father of modern genetics. And he discovered the way in which crossbreeding different plants led to different variations and all these things. And it was through his faith that he was coming to an understanding and seeking out answers to the created world. It wasn't that, as soon as he discovered science, he stopped his faith. He became an abbot and a leader of a religious community and continued to publish papers on this. And then perhaps the most recent and prominent one is Father Georges Lemaitre. He was a Belgian Catholic priest who developed the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory now is known as the prominent theory for how we think this universe came into existence. This reality, this universe was, set in motion. But when he first developed it in the early 20th century, most scientists laughed at him. They thought it was ridiculous because they thought that the Big Bang Theory acknowledged the need for a creator when they said there is no need for a creator. But now, modern science accepts that the Big Bang Theory, because of our discovery of the expanding universe, is the prominent theory when it comes to creation. And so, faith in science. We have faith, and it gives us these revealed truths about the things that we can't see, feel in the created world. And then we have science, the observance of the natural world. And these two correlate because they reveal more to us about who we are. So when it comes to proving God's existence, I think we have to take both together. So first, when we look at this idea of science for proofs of God, there's a couple different ways we can look at it. I think one of the most important ones goes back to the Big Bang Theory. Two molecules that had come together, resulting in an ever-expanding universe. This question of what set those molecules in motion? Who set those molecules in motion? Why were they set in motion? Can't be answered by science. They can tell you, okay, so this molecule, this hydrogen atom and this hydrogen atom, when they collided, resulted in an expansive universe that resulted in everything else that we could ever know and imagine. But it can't explain who set those in motion. And if we believe in other scientific laws, we know that Newton, in his laws of science and his laws of motion, said that a being in motion remains in motion, and a being that is not in movement remains not in movement unless acted upon by another force. So these things had to be acted upon by something to result in them coming together through the laws of motion. And we can say also that whatever did that could not have been set in motion by anything else. We have to say that it has always existed and always resulted in putting things in motion. This is what we call the uncaused cause. This cause that caused everything else, this uncaused being, God, who caused everything else to come into reality, had to set everything in motion. But he himself was not set in motion because he always was. And then you can just observe creation around you. You can see that through reason, that there is no need, if just through chaos, for there to be anything at all. And the fact that everything has its own unique intricacy and order, the fact that things are so complex, that we have this complexity of beings, would point to the fact that there had to be somebody or something that made it in such a way that you and I would be here. Because, if you go back to a few weeks ago, I told you, there's no reason for you to exist at all. But the reason for you to exist is because somebody chose to bring you into existence. And the fact that there is anything should make it to where we can reason that maybe there is a God. And then if we go back to our faith, back to Revelation, we know that God had revealed himself to us. God did come down. He had inspired the authors of Scripture to write down what he wanted to reveal. And then he himself came down through the incarnation. And through the teachings of the Catholic Church has continued to reveal himself to all men. And then if we look at these two things together, this idea of science and faith, there's kind of this weird mixture point in miracles, in personal experience and testimony. Things that can't be explained by something other than a phenomenon that science can try and measure but cannot. One of the great examples is Eucharistic miracles. This personal experience of seeing the body and blood, the bread and the wine, actually become human flesh, testable human blood with human DNA that we can trace back. And if you want to find a compiling of all this, you can go look at a young blessed who died when he was 15 in the early 2000s. His name was Carlo Acutis. So that's Carlo Acutis. And he had compiled, before he died of leukemia, a wide list of miracles, specifically Eucharistic miracles. And when you read these, you hear how the scientific experts went in and performed every test. And what they found was this was not just somebody painting red paint or somebody doing something else. They find that the host, the bread that had been consecrated, actually became flesh when they tested it. And that the wine, the things that could be tested on the host, actually became blood, with a blood type, with DNA markers. They could find these things. They could test them. And then people's own stories within these miracles, and then outside of these miracles, people's own stories of experiencing who God is, coming to know him, where they have these profound transformations. They all point to the fact that there has to be something out there. There has to be someone who has ordered everything. And because of our Catholic faith, we say, that's God. That's the Holy Trinity, who gives life to our very existence, who gives meaning to who we are. God is real. Can we prove that God is real? I don't know if I can give that answer, but I think we can say with reasonable assumptions that God had set things in motion to where we could know him. Science can point us to a reasonable belief that God exists. And then God not only did that, but God revealed himself to us. He didn't just leave the created world and then step away. He instead came down to us to walk among us. And then through that, he continues to live on. In our personal experiences, he continues to reveal himself to us, to show us who he is, to show us his love. God is real, and he wants you to know that. I know that might be crazy. I know that might seem insane to say that God is real because our society says that he's not. But there has to be a reason for all this. There has to be something that points to why everything exists. There has to be somebody who did everything, that set everything in motion. God is real.